Hello, I'm traveling. This is day 68 of reading one canto of the Divine Comedy every day. We are on Paradiso, Canto 1, which I'll read from the Longfellow translation before giving some quick comments. The glory of him who moveth everything doth penetrate the universe, and shine in one part more, and another less. Within that heaven, which most his light receives, was I, and things beheld, which to repeat nor knows nor can, who from above descends, because in drawing near to its desire, our intellect engulfs itself so far, that after it the memory cannot go. Truly, whatever of the holy realm I had the power to treasure in my mind shall now become the subject of my song. O good Apollo, for this last emprise, make of me such a vessel of thy power, as giving the beloved laurel asks. One summit of Parnassus hitherto has been enough for me, but now with both I needs must enter the arena left. Enter into my bosom, thou, and breathe as at the same time when Marsyas thou didst draw out of the scabbard of those limbs of his. O power divine, lend'st thou thyself to me, so that the shadow of the blessed realm stamped in my brain I can make manifest. Thou wilt see me come unto thy darling tree, of which the theme and thou shall make me worthy. So seldom, Father, do we gather them for triumph, or of Caesar, or of poet, the fault and shame of human inclinations, that the Peonian foliage should bring forth joy to the joyous Delphic deity, when any one it makes to thirst for it. A little spark is followed by great flame. Perchance with better voices after me shall prayer be made, that Syrah may respond. To mortal men by passages diverse uprises the world's lamp, but by that one which circles four uniteth with three crosses, with better course and with a better star conjoined it issues, and the mundane wax tempers and stamps more after its own fashion. Almost that passage had made morning there and evening here, and there was wholly white that hemisphere and black the other part, when Beatrice, towards the left-hand side I saw turned round, and gazing at the sun, never did eagle fasten so upon it. And even as a second ray is wont to issue from the first and reascend, like to a pilgrim who would fain return, thus of her action, through the eyes infused in my imagination, mine I made, and sunward fixed mine eyes beyond our wont. There much is lawful which is here unlawful unto our powers, by virtue of the place made for the human species as its own. Not long I bore it, nor so little, but I beheld it sparkle round about like iron that comes molten from the fire. And suddenly it seemed that day to day was added, as if he who has the power had with another sun the heaven adorned. With eyes upon the everlasting wheels stood Beatrice all intent, and I on her, fixing my vision from above removed, such at her aspect inwardly became as Glaucus, tasting of the herb that made him peer of the other gods beneath the sea. To represent transhumanize in words impossible were, the example then suffice him for whom grace the experience reserves. If I was merely what of me thou newly createst, love who governest the heaven, thou knowest, who didst lift me with thy light. When now the wheel which thou dost make eternal desiring thee, made me attentive to it, by harmony thou dost modulate and measure, then seemed to me so much of heaven enkindled by the sun's flame, that neither rain nor river e'er made a lake so widely spread abroad. The newness of the sound and the great light kindled in me a longing for their cause, never before with such acuteness felt. Whence she, who saw me as I saw myself, to quiet in me my perturbed mind, opened her mouth, ere I did mine to ask, and she began, Thou makest thyself so dull with false imagining, that thou seest not what thou wouldst see if thou hadst shaken it off. Thou art not upon earth, as thou believest, but lightning, fleeing its appropriate sight, never ran as thou, who thitherward returnest. If, of my former doubt, I was divested by these brief little words, more smiled than spoken, I in a new one was the more ensnared, and said, Already did I rest content from great amazement, but am now amazed in what way I transcend these bodies' light. Whereupon she, after a pitying sigh, her eyes directed towards me with that look a mother casts on a delirious child, and she began, All things, whatever they be, have order among themselves, and this is the form that makes the universe resemble God. Here do the higher creatures see the footprints of the eternal power, which is the end whereto is made the law already mentioned. In the order that I speak of are inclined all natures, by their destinies diverse, more or less near unto their origin. Hence they move onward unto ports diverse, over the great sea of being, and each one with instinct given it which bears it on. This bears away the fire towards the moon, this in mortal hearts the motive power that this binds together and unites the earth. Nor only the created things that are without intelligence this bow shoots forth, but those that have both intellect and love. The providence that regulates all this makes with its light the heaven forever quiet, wherein that turns which has the greatest haste. And thither now, as to a sight decreed, bears us away the virtue of that cord which aims its arrows at a joyous mark. True is it that as oftentimes the form accords not with the intention of the art, because an answering is matter deaf, so likewise from this course doth deviate sometimes the creature, who the power possesses, though thus impelled to swerve some other way, in the same wise as one may see the fire fall from a cloud, if the first impetus earthward is rested by some false delight. Thou shouldst not wonder more, if well I judge, at thine ascent, than at a rivulet, from some high mount descending to the lowland. Marvel it would be in thee, if deprived of hindrance, thou wert seated down below, as if on earth the living fire were quiet. Thereat she heavenward turned again her face. So I want to make a quick note about the Paradiso, and about the comedy in general, I suppose, and that is that, Dante warns us at the beginning of Paradiso here that he's dealing with something beyond his ability to comprehend. And so it's going to be difficult for him to explain it. And likewise, I myself find myself having a difficult time understanding what he is writing to. Berolini's commentary also affirms this point and says that it can be hard to actually comprehend narratively and plot-wise what is happening. This is not a bug, this is a feature. As Dante deals with things more divine and less human, we ourselves are challenged more. Why? Because we are human. We are sinful. And it's not an accident, therefore, that most people just read the Inferno because they get it. They can understand evil. They see it all the time. They experience it in themselves all the time. I experience it in myself all the time. Purgatorio, moderate difficulty. The Purgatorio answers, perhaps you could say, the question of can the soul be turned towards God, and how? And on the whole, we're less familiar with that, but we can comprehend it. It still takes place on Earth, both metaphorically and literally. The role of Virgil, and therefore the role of reason, within the other parts of the comedy is also indicative of this. Again, in Inferno, he knew everything. In Purgatory, only a little. And now finally, in the Paradiso, we are in heaven. We ourselves have to transhumanize our intellects along with Dante to even begin to comprehend what he's talking about. And to an extent, he admits he cannot quite wrap his head around what he is talking about because, by definition, it is beyond him. It's beyond all of us. So I guess take an encouragement from me to tackle this text with just as much vigor as you did the Inferno and the Purgatorio, and be warned that it's going to be more difficult, but the rewards will be greater as well. Let's get to it. Dante begins the Paradiso with an invocation, not just to the Muses, but now to Apollo. Why? I mean, there's been a little bit of metaphorical invoking of the Greek gods and before, talking about Zeus. Okay, well that's just chief of the gods. That he's just talking about God there. But Apollo, that's why Apollo. Well, remember, Apollo is the god of the sun, among other things, but the sun for sure. And in medieval symbology, the sun represents God. It represents God's light. Our distance from it, our reliance upon it, etc. And so, in this first canto of the Paradiso, where Dante is preparing to ascend to the heavenly bodies, to get closer to the sun, he invokes the god of the sun as a stand-in for invoking it, as a stand-in, but not a replacement for invoking God. When he says Apollo, like normal, when he invokes Zeus or the Muses, he's really referring to that same divine wisdom. And we can know that it's more about this connection to the symbol of the sun in a few different ways. Number one, remember what we talked about with a being's ability to endure, to observe the light of God, the light of Christ, and pay attention to how Beatrice looks directly at the sun as one of the first things she does in this canto. It's really the only thing she does in this canto. She looks directly at the sun and can endure it. And then secondly, Mark Musa points out that Dante's explanation of the time of day that the canto begins at is high noon. The Inferno began in the evening, when things are getting darker. The Purgatorio begins in the morning, where things are brightening. And now the Paradiso begins at high noon, when things are brightest, when his soul is brightest, and the content, the subject of the poem is about things that are highest, things that are brightest. The second thing that happens is Dante's transhumanization. Now, he says right away that this is something that is not able to be explained in words, but we can at least talk about what we can know about it. Firstly, he is transhumanized. That is, he is made into such a form of being that he is able to ascend to the stars. Why is this necessary? And first of all, transhumanism is something that we are actually somewhat familiar with today, something that we've heard about. And he does not mean it in that way. He's not transforming himself via technology or genetics or chemicals or anything of the sort. Rather, his entire self is transhumanized by the Spirit, by the light of God reflected in Beatrice, for the purpose of experiencing God. It is, spirit for the sake of spirit, shall we say. And we can also know the necessity of his transhumanization for this last division of the poem, the Paradiso, and that is that heaven is a spiritual place. Therefore, in order to go to it and explore it as a living human, as Dante is, it is impossible without being transformed in some way. Lastly, one more note for the Paradiso itself. I think we can understand a lot about what's going to happen just through looking at the first 3 lines of the Mark Musa translation. The glory of the one who moves all things penetrates all the universe, reflecting in one part more and in another less. So all things within the universe are full of God's light, of God's love, according to their capacity to contain it. And so we get to heaven, where, nothing can enter unless it is perfect, unless it's completely pure. That's what purgatory was all about. And yet, there will still be differences in the amount of God's light and love that fills that thing, in the same way as different sizes of glass will contain different amounts of water, although that both may still be full. That's all for today, though. I'll see you tomorrow.